Well, hi there, all you third through sixth graders. As we continue our adventure through the chapter book, The Tiger Rising, today we'll be reading chapters 9 and 10. Remember, your job is to pick out all the important information, what you're learning about each one of these segments that adds to the story. And we finished 7 and 8, and that 21 pages of the beginning of the book represented just one day, the first day, from the time Rob found a tiger, got on the bus, went to school, and getting back on the bus and coming home. So we ended the first day. We got to see the beginnings of a friendship starting to build between Sistine and Rob as they sat together on the bus. And of course, the Three-Monger brothers, they had to continue their bullying ways. But nonetheless, we're beginning to realize that there's going to be a strong friendship built between Sistine and Rob as the story goes on. We also got to meet Rob's father a little bit more, learn a little bit more about him and the fact that he was pretty lousy at cooking macaroni. What it was like, in the motel where he lived. And it ended with Rob beginning to carve. Remember, his mom taught him how to whittle and to carve wood, and that he was going to carve his image of this tiger. And as he cut into the wood more and more, it was starting to come out to be more and more an image of Sistine as the plot thickens. Chapter 9. His father woke him up at 5:30 the next morning. "Come on, son," he said, shaking Rob's shoulder. "Come on. You're a working man now. You got to get up." He took his hand away and stood over Rob for a minute more, and then he left. Rob heard the door to the motel room squeak open. He opened his eyes. The world was dark. The only light came from the falling Kentucky star. Rob turned over in bed and pulled back the curtain and looked out the window at the sign. It was like having his own personal shooting star, but he didn't ever make a wish on it. He was afraid that if he started wishing, he might not be able to stop. In his suitcase of not thoughts, there were also not wishes. He kept the lid closed on them too. Rob leaned on his elbow and stared at the star and listened to the rain gently drumming its fingers on the roof. There was a warm, glowing kind of feeling in his stomach, a feeling that he wasn't used to. It took him a minute to name it. The tiger. The tiger was out there. He got out of bed, put on his shorts and t-shirt. "Still hot," his father said when Rob stepped out the door. "And still raining." "Uh-huh," said Rob, rubbing his eyes. "Yes, sir. If it don't stop soon, the whole state's going to be nothing but one big swamp." "The rain don't bother me," Rob muttered. On the day of his mother's funeral, it had been so sunshiny that it hurt his eyes. And after the funeral, he and his father had to stand outside in the hot, bright light and shake everybody's hand. Some of the ladies hugged Rob, pulling him to them in jerky, desperate movements, smashing his head into their pillowy chests. "If you don't look just like her," they told him, rocking him back and forth and holding on to him tightly. Or they said, "You got your mama's hair, that cobwebby blonde." They ran their fingers through his hair and patted his head like he was a dog. And every time Rob's father extended his hand to someone else, Rob saw the ripped place in his suit where it had split open when he slapped Rob to make him stop crying. And it reminded Rob again, do not cry, do not cry. That's what the son made him think of, the funeral. And so he didn't care if he ever saw the son again. He didn't care if the whole state did turn into a swamp. His father stood up and went back into the motel room, got himself a cup of coffee and brought it back outside. The steam rose off it and curled into the air. Now that I'm a working man, Rob said shyly, could I drink some coffee? His father smiled at him. Well, he said, I guess that'd be all right. Rob went inside and poured himself a mug of coffee and brought it back outside and sat down next to his father, sipped it slowly. It tasted hot and dark and bitter, but he liked it. All right, his father said after about 10 minutes, it's time to get to work. He stood up. It wasn't even 6 o'clock. As they walked together alongside the back of the motel to the maintenance shed, his father started to whistle, Mining for Gold. It was a sad song he used to sing with Rob's mother. Her high, sweet voice had gone swooping over his father's deep one like a small bird flying over the solid world. His father must have remembered, too, because he stopped halfway through the song and shook his head and cursed softly under his breath. Rob let his father walk ahead of him. He slowed down and stared into the woods, wanting to see some small part of the tiger, a flick of his tail or the glow from his eyes, but there was nothing to see except for rain and darkness. Come on, son, his father said, his voice hard, and Rob hurried to catch up. Chapter 10. Rob was sweeping the laundry room when Lillie Mae, the Kentucky Star's housekeeper, came in and threw herself down in one of the metal chairs that were lined up against the cement-blocked wall. You know what? She said to Rob. No, ma'am, said Rob. Well, I'll tell you what, said Lillie Mae. She reached up and adjusted the butterfly clip in her thick black hair. I'd rather be sweeping up after some pigs in a barn than cleaning up after the people in this place. Pigs at least give you some respect. Rob leaned on his broom and stared at Lillie Mae. He liked looking at her. Her face was smooth and dark like a beautiful piece of wood, and Rob liked to think that if he had been the one who carved Lillie Mae, he would have made her just the way she was, with her long nose, high cheekbones, and slanty eyes. What are you staring at? Lillie Mae asked, her eyes narrowed. What are you doing out of school? Rob shrugged. I don't know, he said. What do you mean you don't know? Rob shrugged again. Don't be moving your shoulders up and down in front of me acting like some skinny old bird trying to fly away. You want to end up cleaning motel rooms for a living? Rob shook his head. That's right, ain't nobody wants this job. I'm the only fool Beauchamp can pay to do it. You gotta stay in school, she said, else you'll end up like me. She shook her head and reached into the pockets of her dress and pulled out a single cigarette and 2 sticks of 8-ball licorice gum. She put one piece of gum in her mouth and handed the other one to Rob, lit her cigarette, leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. Now, she said, the scent of smoke and licorice slowly filled the laundry room. Go on. Now tell me why you ain't in school. On account of my legs being all broke up, Rob said. Lillie Mae opened her eyes and looked over the top of her glasses at Rob's legs. She said after a minute. How long you had that? About 6 months, Rob said. I can tell you how to cure that, said Lillie Mae, pointing with her cigarette at his legs. I can tell you right now. don't need to even go to the doctor. Huh? Said Rob. He stopped chewing his gum and held his breath. What if Willie Mae healed him and then he had to go back to school? Sadness, said Willie Mae, closing her eyes and nodding her head. You keeping all that sadness down low in your legs. You're not letting it get up to your heart where it belongs. You gotta let that sadness rise on up. Oh, said Rob. He let his breath out. He was relieved. Willie Mae was wrong. She couldn't cure him. The principal thinks it's contagious, he said. Man ain't got no sense, Willie Mae said. He's got lots of certificates, Rob offered. They're all framed and hung up on his wall. I bet he ain't got no certificate for sense, though, said Willie Mae darkly. She rose up out of her chair and stretched. I gotta clean some rooms, she said. You ain't going to forget what I told you about them legs, are you? Oh, no, ma'am, said Rob. What'd I tell you then, she said, towering over him. Willie Mae was tall, the tallest person Rob had ever seen. To let the sadness rise, Rob said. He repeated the words as if they were part of a poem. He gave them a certain rhythm the way Willie Mae had when she said them. That's right, said Willie Mae. You got to let the sadness rise on up. She left the room in a swirl of licorice and smoke, and after she was gone, Rob wished that he had told her about the tiger. He felt a sudden desperate need to tell somebody who wouldn't doubt him, somebody who was capable of believing in tigers. Well, that wraps up chapter 10. I'll leave you to think about the new character, Willie Mae, that just entered into the picture here. And when you're listening to some of these words, think about how they create an image in your mind, in your thoughts. And through the imagery of metaphors and similes, how those type of elements of writing are so important as we internalize and create the picture of what it is we're reading. And if you don't know what a metaphor and a simile is, then I'll challenge you to look those up in the dictionary, because this book is full of them. You all have a good day now. We'll see you tomorrow as we move on into the next 2 chapters.